Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Kelsey Henderson, President of Continuum Advisory Group, and I will be your MC for the remainder of today. I'd like to welcome our first speaker for the afternoon, Mr. Jim Ellis, the Vice President of Corporate Construction for Microsoft, and also the Chairman of the Board for the Construction Users Roundtable.
Thank you all. Good afternoon. I have the unique challenge of keeping you awake after that big lunch. I'm really delighted to be here today, and first I want to recognize 18 months really since we've all been together like this. What a great opportunity to reconnect, re-network, a great group of professionals that I always learn from, have the opportunity to really make a difference with in this industry. So thanks for what you do. I also want to thank Steve and Greg. This is a historic moment, it really is. And they've given me the opportunity really to talk about a topic that's really relevant. And everybody says it's relevant for our future. It's not. It's relevant for today. We're going to talk about sustainability. And perhaps this morning you heard me say, hey, we haven't done anything in reality. We've been talking about it since 1980. I remember being part of the Texas Sustainable Commission and all these grand plans we had. Here we are 40 years later. What progress have we made? And I don't want to be Debbie Downer because I'm going to talk about a lot of positive things that we're doing as part of Microsoft. And you also heard me say we need a bias for action, something that we can count on. I'd say the bias for action on sustainability is sitting in this room. It's with the research we're doing. It's with the research we will do. It's kind of the merge of technology and innovation, the theme of this around resiliency, that helps us get to a point where we truly have an actionable set of items that we can work on together. Sure, reduce carbon. Make sure our water resources are still sustainable. Frankly, guys, we're polluting the heck out of this earth. I've done a lot of reflections over the course of COVID. And I reflected a lot on COVID. We've been through a lot as a human race. But one of the things I thought a lot about is, have I done enough personally around sustainability? I spent 40 years of my career in petrochemicals. Have I made the difference? Did I really drive it hard enough? So to me, this is about my reflection on what we can do. I'm proud to be working now for a company called Microsoft, a 75-year-old company. Technology company, really, 75 years old. That's really quite progressive today in moving the needle. I also want to share one thing before I get into the charts. It's no longer about government regulation. It's about the community's right to operate. Our communities today are much more sophisticated than they ever had. And for those of you who are going and looking for permits and how we're going to operate, I've faced a few of those challenges over the last 5 years that are just significant. And the community has the right to say yes or no. And it's really dependent on us. So our right to operate is really very, very critical. We're facing a planet-sized challenge. You might say, well, do we have the science? That's important. Do we have data? That's important. At the end of the day, though, it's about getting started. This is probably one of the greatest challenges of our lifetime. You know, during COVID, we would have expected to see a drop in carbon. We didn't. That was pretty staggering for me when I learned that. We're generating today more amounts of waste and pollution than we have in the history that we've been measuring, across that history, than ever before. We're polluting our oceans, our freshwater resources. How many of you like to fish in this room? Many. How many of you like to go to the beach? Many. How do you like it when back in the 1980s I was going out to Galveston with my children, and they came out of the water and their legs were filled with tar? That's not something we can take any longer. something that we really have to take seriously. We got to replenish the precious resources. And why are we doing it? Not for those of you that are sitting in the room, but for those that will come, our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. I want to know that my great-grandchildren can look back and say, my great-granddad made a difference. I think you all want that as well. So what are we going to do? We got to get active. We got to get started. Climate change. We talk a lot about climate change. It's continuing to impact our food, our water, our economies. Hey guys, sustainability is just not about being environmentally sound. It's also about the business proposition, right? You all remember the old definition of sustainability. There's an economic component associated with it, right? So we got to pay attention to that. With that, I believe one of the key solutions is really how do we work together collaboratively at the intersection of technology and science to make a difference. And again, the folks sitting in this room are really at the pinnacle in terms of being able to really influence that. And then clearly, we want to be able to make a difference in the world. I want to share with you a little bit about our Microsoft Challenge and mission, which is really to empower every person in every organization on the planet to achieve more. We can't do that in the absence of sustainability. So clearly, an opportunity for us to really drive this. So we're committed. It's not something we just talk about. It's not an operational discipline. It's really at the core of our business. And I'm going to share some things that will indicate how it's at the core of a business and the decision-making process that we're utilizing within Microsoft to make good decisions about the future of the environment. So I'm really delighted to be here, and I'd like to kind of share our next chart here about our commitment. Our company manages the needed change. We think sustainably. We create broad opportunity across a number of fronts. It's not just about Microsoft. It's about every one of our stakeholders. And I know many of you in the room here today are partners of Microsoft and other companies like us. And we need to partner up. It's going to take collaboration. We recognize that innovation, again, and technology are important, but, do we all have the right mindset? Again, that talking back that goes 40 years. Do we have the right mindset about doing something different? So simply, today is about making the right decisions for tomorrow, founded on sound technology, with broad-based commitment, and a real call to action to protect the future generations. So this is a little bit about our sustainability journey over the last 75 years as a company. We've launched many, many important pieces of work here, and we've made steady progress. And if you go and you look at here, in 2009, we actually set our first goals. We said we're going to be carbon neutral back in 2011. That meant something back then, right? That's no longer good enough. We're going to be carbon negative. And I'm going to talk about what those goals specifically mean and how we're going to get there together. We've also decided, hey, we have that debate all the time. Well, how's this going to get paid for? Right? Many of you are questioning that. And carbon tax is not far down the road. We talk a lot about it. But we can make decisions internally around making sure we're charging ourselves. And we do that. We set up a carbon fee structure. Every business, every function in Microsoft has to pay to this carbon fee, to a certain dollar value for a metric ton of carbon. And that serves as the sourcing internally for the capital that we deploy to drive the improvements in becoming a better sustainable company. We put $1 billion in the coffer. And we're pulling out of that. So it's not about just talking, it's about acting and really being committed to make steady progress. So when we reached 2019, we'd done a lot of things. We were very proud. However, our CEO, Satya Nadella, basically stepped up and said, still not good enough. So we kind of recasted what our vision and mission was. How are we going to make a next step change in our commitment to this world? And as part of that, we migrated to another set of targets, which have been communicated out, made very, very public, and we're acting to those every day. I'm personally accountable in construction. In a minute, I'll tell you what accountability I have, because believe it or not, Construction represents 11% of the carbon impact in the world today, 11%. Believe it or not, 70% of that is steel. 30% of it is other, what I'll call mechanical, electrical, plumbing, HVAC type materials. So we're going to go forward with a very big difference, making a very big difference in these areas. Setting a net decline in our total emissions, becoming negative on carbon, positive on water, 100% as it relates to waste, and really driving towards a circular economy in a real way, not only internally in what we do, but also engaging our partners in our supply chain, across the entire supply chain, to kind of partner up with us in terms of ideas. So, what have been those public commitments? I think you can see them here. I'll repeat them again. Carbon negative by 2030. Water positive by 2030. Zero waste by 2030. And we're using a lot of land around the globe to build these data centers. Somebody asked me today, how many data centers are you building? I can't give you the exact number, but recognize it's in every region of the world. The Azure cloud is an important part of moving forward and enabling, as I said, our vision and mission so that we can make a difference, and every employee, every person can make a difference moving to the future. So we're doing this by focusing in on carbon, water, waste, as well as our ecosystem. Our biodiversity and how we manage ecosystems is very, very, very fragile. And frankly, it goes back to also the right to operate opportunities that we have. Nobody wants to sit in front, as a community member, of a refinery. I'm just going to be bloody honest. Nobody wants to sit in front of a data center. You're taking our energy. You're energy intensive. You're taking all our electricity. You got a building up there. You haven't protected it. I can see it from my home. My quality of life essentially has been interrupted and impacted. So we got to pay attention to this. We want to put data centers. We want to make sure we're protecting the diversity, the biodiversity on and off our data sites, and that's another commitment that we've made, albeit it's informal. We're committed to growing our business responsibly, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. So what has been, or what will be, again, our path to carbon negative? I want to talk about the concept of 100, 100, 0. What does that mean? 100% renewable resources and fuels. 100% of the time, zero carbon. That's the goal. So we're working towards that. We're going to electrify our global fleets. And you might say, well, is that for operations? No. We're going to look for how we construct with electric vehicles. That's important. The battery industry is really evolving. The technology is advancing. Shame on us for not capitalizing on it if we can, right? So that's an area where we see huge opportunity. We're going to reduce not only our direct emissions, which are important to us, but we're also going to have an obligation on our supply chain to be a partner. Let me quote that, to be a partner with Microsoft. You've got to reduce by over 50% the emissions associated with what you do as a strategic supplier. So this is going right to the supply chain. Sits on us, but we know we can't do it ourselves. And then we're going to remove more carbon emitted by 2030. And then this is an interesting statistic, Stephen and I talked about that the other day. He couldn't believe when he talked to our Chief Sustainability Officer that we would have a goal like this. By 2050, and this is the stretch, we're actually going to be in a position where over the life of the 75 years we've operated, we will have understood our carbon impact and we will be net neutral. So we're not only looking forward, we're looking behind and understanding what we need to do to kind of restore, get things back on a good path. Kind of being that good corporate citizen that we know each of us have to be if we're going to be continuing to operate our facilities and our businesses over the next 30, 40 years. Okay, so here's the challenge. We're sitting with construction professionals in the room here, right? what does this mean to me? How can I really make an impact? And we can. The first important part in all of this is, how do we measure? What's the data telling us? Do we have a good idea of every component that we put in the building of our facilities and assets to understand the actual embedded embodied carbon? And the answer to that is yes. We're making good progress. Are we perfect yet? No, but we're getting there. We're including all of the components that are coming in into what we're calling an embodied carbon calculator. That calculator is looking at every single piece of material that goes into the construction of a data center and understands exactly what the carbon content is in it. And I'll share with you the model that we're using here in a minute, because it's quite powerful, and it's all data-driven. Secondly, we're going to look at opportunities. So if steel is 60 to 70% of the impact, what are we going to do about steel? Steel is important to our industry, right? We got to have steel. We're going to replace steel with timber. You saw that on Ian Kahn's presentation this morning. How many of you were paying attention to the list that he put up there that basically said, we have all of these alternatives already developed. How many by hand are actually going and utilizing that in your bills? Not many. So we have a huge opportunity to take that information, translate that into specific actions, understand where we can have impact, and then drive the economic model that we make business decisions on for projects at a very granular level that always looked at safety, cost, schedule, reliability, operability, and let's just add the S now, sustainability. And in a minute, I'll share with you what that means. In our phase 3, we're going to look at concrete. Concrete was on that list this morning as well. We got choices. We have two choices. We're driving minimum essential, fit for purpose quantities in everything that we do. Challenging the heck out of the BIM model. Challenging the heck out of the material sheets that come out, the data sheets. And then we look and we decide, have we really minimized the footprint associated with this asset? And a lot of times we find the answer is no, and then we value engineer it, and you guys know the routine here, and then we get it a little bit better, but have we gotten it to the point where it needs to be? Still a lot of work to be done. And so that's an opportunity to start to take a look at that. There are many, many not-in-kind replacements here. I heard a story the other day. I was visiting one of the data centers, and I was interacting with one of our general contractors, and they said, hey, you know, Jim, we don't need to put rebar in this concrete anymore. You all know what rebar does, right? It's that stability component that helps that concrete to stay stable over the course of its life. Now, there's an additive in that does exactly the same. It's coming in a green way. You add it into the concrete, you lose no structural strength whatsoever, and there you have a sustainable solution on your concrete, and you can eliminate all of that rebar that had to go in there. Anybody doing that in the room here today? Yeah, there are a couple hands. That's really, really good. Super. And thanks for the GC for lifting that to us, because knowledge is power. Knowledge makes the difference. To the extent we can really share with each other the good best practices that we're doing, and the CII and CURT Forum is a great way to do that, you know, the more progress we're going to make in this arena. So thanks for doing that. Okay, so let's go to this next piece of the digitization and continuous improvement. I want to talk a little bit about this embodied carbon calculator, because I think it's a very practical solution and one which we can probably share and leverage with you, called EC3. This is our opportunity to quantify data-driven analysis on what types of sustainable materials that we have. What's the carbon content? And then we utilize that as a way of kind of running it. We take the BIM model, we take all our materials, we put it in the EC3 calculator, we know exactly how much carbon we're going to have that's going to go into that data center, and then what we do? We optimize. We look for alternatives. We always run, in the early parts of front-end loading, our priced options. This needs to be a routine best practice that becomes part of that price option discussion that happens very early in FEL, probably FEL2, before we finalize scope. So clearly an opportunity. And then we have the quantification of different types of models that we can put forward in terms of building that asset. And we compare them, like I said, cost, schedule, safety, sustainability obviously is an important part of that decision-making process moving forward. Once we select that, and we have a decision framework, it's part of our governance process. So when you're going through a gate for us, if you haven't done the sustainability piece of your work, guess what? You just flat out not going through the gate. So it's simple. It has to take on the operating discipline that we know that good projects get done with, and it has to be done with the other leading indicator, which is let's get it done part and front-end loading. Make it done early. So clearly that's an opportunity for us. Then reporting out's important. Tracking our progress. Are we making a difference? Are we making inroads? Have we moved the needle? Are our data centers truly positively contributing to reducing carbon, improving our water consumption in terms of reducing, right? Improving our waste in terms of recycle. And if we can't answer the question, yes, we still got some work to do. So gating with teeth, with sustainability being a parameter, is extremely important moving forward if we're going to really move the needle and have data centers that are much more carbon efficient and sustainability focused. Then finally, we can't do this one-off. Knowledge, leveraging knowledge, setting the right standards. Our design specs, we spent a lot of time in putting that into our Division 1 specs. So when we go forward and we're dealing with our contracting community, those Division 1 specs are there. They know what the expectation is. They also know in order to get to that shortlisted bid slate, they better be kind of coming in with some good solutions. We have a couple of our partners in the room today that are exactly doing that. They're still working with us today. We're looking at timber with one of them, which will help to shift the needle a little bit on utilizing the steel that is quite carbon impactful. And then those design standards get updated so you still have your continuous improvement process that you got to run in order to make sure it stays fresh. So pretty easy cycle. Quantify the data, select with sustainability being a criteria, report out, keep track, measure your progress, adjust as you need to, make sure that it's formalized through a couple of your managing processes as you go forward and you execute your projects. Okay, so I've covered some of this, but this is kind of a recap on EC3, and this is kind of the sharing. Our building materials and construction, body carbon, again, 11%, that's not insignificant. We work on that, we make a difference. Our GCs, basically, are going to be required to use EC3. We're partnering on that. They've got to step up and help us get to where we need to be, because we can't do it ourselves. I said that very early. And going forward, they're going to have a target of 30% minimum reduction. If that can't be demonstrated, then the slate looks different next time. It's that simple. It has to have some accountability associated with it. Finally, these low-carbon materials are accessible today. That's part of us doing. It's commercially available. Let's start somewhere. It's not perfect. Let's postpone perfection. Let's postpone excellence, but let's get started. Let's move the needle a bit. And with time, we're going to be able to get there. Last, I'd like you to check out the Embodied Carbon in Construction white paper. I almost cringed this morning when Ian Kahn said, go ahead and Google it. And I'm not going to Google anything, but I am going to Bing it. And clearly, that's an important part of us understanding. I recommend that you go out here. We're happy to share the white paper. You can actually click on that and get a lot more information than what I'm sharing with you today. Okay, path to zero waste by 2030. So I want to give a shout out to my SABIC colleagues, who I know is here as well in this conference. I had the pleasure of working for them for 8 years. And one of the, I think, high spots of my career was when we started to launch the technology necessary for taking all plastic waste, not having to recycle that waste mechanically and separate it, and actually put all that waste into a thermal oxidizer where it basically, irregardless of the type of plastic, can be put into a pie oil that can be recycled back to either a refinery or to a cracker. Truly circular economy on plastics. I mean, there's been stories here in the news, guys, that we can all read about plastic pellets showing up on the beach. Not good. That's not helping our industry at all. We really need to get to a point where we don't have that going on, and we have technologies deployed, resources deployed to develop those technologies in a way that we create these kinds of applications so that, and those products that are basically sustainable, they're recyclable, they come, they help us. You know what? I'm not going to say this to Sabic that they're going to be one of our providers, but folks that are doing that kind of work across the board in terms of looking at circular economy are going to be preferred. They're going to be strategic partners of Microsoft moving forward because they're doing the right thing. It's aligned to us as a core value. So clearly that's an area. So plastics and packaging, you get the message here. No single use. We're going to recycle. And we're going to use circular economies to help us do that. We've made a decision that we're going to basically repurpose all of our hardware in our data centers. So servers have a life. How many of you change out your phone every 2 years? Quite a bit of hands. How many change out your computers every 2-3 years? Yeah, lots of hands. Why? Where does it go? Do you know? So to me, this is another commitment that says, hey, we're going forward, we're going to reuse, we're going to repurpose 90% of the equipment that goes into our cloud hardware is going to be recycled and repurposed. So not only a benefit from a standpoint of sustainability, but look at the economics associated with that. It's an economic benefit for us to do that as well. So win-win across the board. So we need to be looking for those opportunities across our industry to do more of that. 100% recyclable of our Surface devices and our product packaging, that goes along hand in hand with our goal for zero waste. We're basically going to divert 90% of our operational waste. We have a couple of facilities. Our facility up in the Quincy area in Seattle represented about 50% of our total operational waste on a global scale. Today, after lots of work and focus, they're certified with zero waste coming out of that facility. It's doable. I'm a firm believer of the art of possibility. Benjamin Zander, if you haven't read him, he's actually the leader of the Philharmonic in Boston. He does a lot about the art of possibility and actually taking handicapped children and teaching them how to play musical instruments and then puts them in an orchestra and conducts them. He has no limit to his mindset on what's possible. These things are possible for us. We're seeing them coming to life as part of Microsoft and part of our culture and part of our commitment. And then we're going to divert 70% of our construction waste. Because land is precious to us, we find ourselves going into different geos of the world where we actually have a facility that already exists. No land really available for doing what we need to do. Doesn't meet our criteria for power, for energy, for latency, for all those things that are important to us in Microsoft to basically build our facility. And so we have to demolish that existing building. Well, guess what happens when you've operated a building for 40 plus years? The legacy that you buy. So doing good due diligence is very important, but also putting that into a strategy that says, okay, I have no other choices. I got to deal with this. So I'm going to clean it up. And I'm going to clean it up in a way that it is sustainable. And more importantly, I'm going to go forward and I'm going to recycle those materials that basically I've deconstructed in a way that can create value. Again, part of the cyclical economy that we're driving. So construction and demolition waste, clearly part of our equation. Okay, so circular economies, I've touched on that already. I just want to kind of bring it home. Again, circular economy starts with the raw materials. We know that. We basically design for circularity as part of our business model. It's a strategic driver for many of us. Certainly it is for Microsoft. And make sure that that design for circularity and deconstruction actually adds value to the community, to our customers, and to our shareholders. And we do calculate what that looks like. And then finally, we have to enable functional, economically, and viable reuse. So get the material, use it, take it over its life cycle, recover it, recycle it, make it fit for purpose again, reuse it, and the cycle goes on. So both sustainable and economically viable. Okay. So with that, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the fact that we don't have all the solutions from a technology standpoint. We talked a lot about technology today, right, being an important parameter of our success, and we haven't really, as an industry, capitalized on technology in a way that I would say it's making the difference it can make in the areas of such like sustainability. And those data centers of the future, for me, have got to save energy. They are highly energy intensive. You guys know that. I mean, they generate a lot of heat. Just think about the computer in the back of your desk. How much heat is that generating? Imagine that with all of these components sitting in a single data center. So you got to take that heat out. They got to save water, and we got to focus in on the waste. So what's the creativity that we've looked at over the course of the last several years? And one of those is around liquid immersion cooling. And I'm going to share with you a video here in a minute that basically will show some of the creativity on technology development, and again, that art of possibility moving forward. That project's called Project Nantic. It's gone back a couple of years where we actually went and tested a data center off the coast of Scotland underwater. Fully green. So all of the energy for that was essentially delivered through sustainable sources, windmills, batteries, things of that nature. And it sat underneath there for a year for us to really run the pilot to understand, can we do it? When you see the video, I think you'll get excited about some of the new technology moving forward. This project also uses cold seawater. It doesn't use fresh water. Many of us are working on desalinization, even in the US right now, because we don't have enough fresh water to go around. Water is our next war. I hate to say it. It's coming down to that. And we want to build in places and we want to grow in places that don't have any water. What are we going to do? We got to have a solution that we put in play. So this doesn't tap fresh water resources, and basically it's determined to have better cooling efficiency than what we do either through air cooling or once through, freshwater recycle cooling. The underwater servers, believe it or not, were more reliable. They failed 80% less time. And so when you have that kind of rate of land-based control group that's kind of compared to a sea-based, is there an opportunity here to take that? How do you scale it? That's the challenge. How do we move forward and scale something like that? Given the growth that we're experiencing in the Azure cloud and across many of our peer companies, it's just phenomenal. So the scaling becomes our next challenge. But if you're going to scale, you want to do it sustainably, right? You don't want to do it and just continue to consume the resources in a negative way. So with that, what I'd like to do is show you the video. If you guys can cue the video up and share it, appreciate it.
Kind of a far-out idea, but highly relevant to the future of Microsoft.
And as we look at the world today, we see many more interactive applications, things like AR and VR. In order to really address that and provide this more responsive cloud, one of the things that we look at is bringing the cloud closer to our customers.
Project Natick not only is an exercise in green tech, but it's also an exercise in whether we can get to a mass production concept.
The leadership in offshore renewable energy is really in Europe. Scotland is also home to the European Marine Energy Centre, which is the largest test site in the world for offshore renewable energies like tide and wave energy. Putting something in the ocean is something that we don't really have a whole lot of experience with. For this deployment, we're working with a company called Naval Group of France.
Getting that group of engineers in the same room with our group of engineers, there were ideas that came up that spurred an idea in someone else, and it really led us to get to the design that we're at now.
The vessel was built as two pieces. There's an external shell, which is the pressure vessel itself, and then an internal payload.
So this data center runs entirely off renewable energy. Our vessel is powered by a combination of solar power, wind power, and offshore tidal and wave energy.
Yes. 1348. Yes. Yes.
This is a true lights-out data center. People have been wanting to design such a data center for the last decades that I've been involved in the business, and this is the very first one that I've actually seen that we're going to do it. And we'll see what happens.
So we had around 35 people on the sea, 5 boats. And at Abilia-Crew, we had the team checking all the electricity to make sure that the connection were just perfect.
Right, we are uplinked to S1. All right, then I think we can move forward.
Officially, Naval Group says on the infrastructure side, it's okay to proceed with deployment.
Microsoft agrees. Terminé.
The native data center by no means replaces those big data centers that we've come to know.
Just being able to order precisely the amount of data center capacity you need and have it delivered to you, that is the product concept that we dream about with Project Native.
So that's where technology is really kind of helping us make a difference. Again, the key challenge for us is scalability, but how exciting is that to see that we can make something like this work, learn from it, grow from it, protect the environment, and then really have an economic advantage by deploying it. It's really quite impressive. So I'd like to recap now our shareholders, the street, NGOs. They're all asking us questions. What's next? What's Microsoft going to do? Obviously, we feel very proud of what we've done so far. I think we're setting the pace. We're always open to learning. That's an important piece. I learn from you guys a lot as we kind of noodle it. Maybe after this session is over, you know, I'd love your reflections on it, maybe one-on-one discussions so that we can actually have some dialogue on where we might have opportunity to leverage from each other. But migrating to the cloud in and of itself has reduced embodied carbon by 98%. It's huge, significant. We're optimizing our data centers. We're looking for continued ways to optimize them. We talked this morning, again, Ian talked a little bit this morning about smart cities. Smart buildings are part of building smart cities. We're focused in on smart buildings, right? Because that's what we can control. And as you put these together in the aggregate, you know, they all scale up to be something that's meaningful. Carbon-free, that's something that we're committed to. We're not going to back away from that. Something that's core to us. Something that we're going to continue to drive. Something we're going to continue to innovate on, right? Because we know resiliency is going to be extremely important for us moving into the future. Not only for us, but for planet Earth. Hybrid work's going to continue. I'm sure all of your companies are talking about that. We've got to be ready for that. That's what's driving a lot of this scaling, guys. The important parts of getting people to have access to cloud environment for tools. I hope you're all using Teams. I was on a Zoom call this morning. I almost had to go and leave the room. But anyway, we're proud that you guys are using that because it's a great tool. So we're going to eliminate the single use of plastics. We've talked about that. We're reducing the impact across the supply chain. This is just not about looking in the mirror. It's about broadening the mirror out and looking at ourselves as a supply chain, because that's where the differences will be made. And then finally, you know, utilizing state-of-the-art technology, I think I'll be the first to admit we're not where we need to be yet. And again, I'll repeat, organizations like CII, where research, really good research gets done by extremely good PhD professionals across the globe. That's a great benefit to us as an industry when we work together. Then CURT, moving in now and playing a role to deploy that technology with speed and urgency and figuring that out. I'm really proud to be part of this organization. And I hope you are too, because this is something that's going to make a difference for us moving forward. I'd just like to conclude by thanking each and every of you. Clearly, sustainability is everyone's responsibility. We can't take it lightly. Again, our grandchildren and their grandchildren are going to depend on us making good decisions today. It's not about a future that's sustainable. It's about getting to that future of sustainability by starting right now. So I'm asking you, in this room, be the impact. Make the difference. Step up and be counted. Don't postpone perfection, or do postpone perfection. And clearly, we're going to make a difference together. I want to thank you for your time and attention today, and I'm open for a few questions if we have time.
Thank you, Jim. That was a very inspiring presentation. I think the audience would agree based on the number of questions that I have here. So I'll try to narrow it down a little bit for you. The first thing I will say is that Jim's slides are available in the app. So for anybody who wanted to have a copy of that presentation, it is available for download there. We had a number of questions that came in related to what you said about timber. And so I want to start with kind of a bundle of those. The first one was, in addition to timber, are you looking at other structural options like fiber reinforced composites?
Perfect. Great question. And yeah, actually, we are looking at those here. So polymer reinforced FRP. We're exploring some of that. It's probably not applicable to the main structure of steel, but certainly very applicable to parts of that unit op that we're building. Stairwells, modularized. The FRP has to be produced sustainably, obviously, right? But it is a way with that polymer to be reinforcing, we don't lose anything, and we're excited about testing some of those out. Our engineering team and our construction team are looking at those, and we're actually going to have a pilot on that moving forward within the next 6 months.
Okay. Along those same lines, with already depleted forests around the world, where do you plan to source this timber? And could the shift from other materials to timber be seen as kind of shifting the problem somewhere else?
Oh, great question, yeah. First of all, let me answer the latter part of that. We do not want to shift the problem someplace else. It just come back and get you anyway, right? So we got to make sure our sourcing strategies are actually good. We have to look at partnering. We've got to bring those from places that are basically aligned, again, with our core values of sustainability. We also have to think about how we replenish. Timber is not a resource that's going to last forever unless we do that and take it seriously. So we're going to go in. We have a sourcing strategy. I can't kind of disclose what that is right now. We're working in partners with one of our GCs that's in the room here today. If they're okay with us doing that, I'm happy to do that later on. But needless to say at first, this is a U.S. data center that we're going to pilot this on, and clearly we're excited about moving that forward.
Great. To what extent will modularization play in your goal to sustainability?
Modularization. Mm-hmm. Well, you heard me talk about scalability, right? Scalability is extremely important. One of the OS2 key areas of focus is around miniaturization, right, and modularization. I believe we're just touching the iceberg for this in the data center space today. Mainly for the reason is there's a lot of air. You don't want to be shipping air. But many of you who know me in the room, I'm pretty much a zealot when it comes to modularization. I support it wholly. And I've taken on the charge to kind of bring my experience to Microsoft, basically to talk about how can we modularize. If I can modularize a cracker in Southwest Texas that has 47 mods associated with it, right? Some of those upwards of 14,000 tons, build them in 3 mod yards in China, getting to the US, not an injury in China, on the project, on cost, on schedule, meeting all safety requirements, plug and play. This works, guys. This works. And when we bypass the considerations for modularization across all industry segments, we're leaving it on the table. I believe that passionately about it, right? And it's an area from a standpoint of how are we going to get everyone in this room to think about that the same? So modularization, you saw the NATEC. How do we scale that up? There's got to be modularization associated with that, right? In some way, shape, or form. We haven't gotten all the answers to that because it's just coming out of its infancy in the pilot. But clearly, these are areas that we're thinking about. We are modularizing parts of the data center today, so I don't want to kind of misdirect here. Those are areas that we do have opportunities on, but it's kind of piecemeal. It's not the whole data center, like we're doing perhaps in petrochemicals with some of our refineries and downstream operations. Thanks.
Great. So with the use of cold seawater, does that process yield warm seawater?
It does.
And at a certain point, is that going to have an impact as you talk about scalability for that model? Is there a certain point where we sort of start to affect the temperatures of the ocean?
Yeah, no, another really, really good question. Thanks for asking it. This is something we actually measured on the pilot, and the impact was actually quite minuscule. Within the first 3 meters, everything dissipated to ambient ocean temperature coming from this experiment. So to me, it says it's doable. Once you start to scale it, location becomes important. How do we continue to control it? I think that's an important part. I want to say one more thing about this. So, when you have a little bit of warmer temperature, it tends to be a migrating area for fish and sea life. So from a biodiversity standpoint, we actually observed that as well. So that was also a positive indicator of that, we put it there, maybe you slightly warmed the temperature, but it dissipated, but it did create a biodiversity advantage for us in terms of some of the sea life that was there.
Okay. Is Microsoft utilizing the Envision sustainability rating system for data centers or any other projects?
Can you repeat, Kelsey? I'm sorry.
The Envision sustainability rating system.
Right.
Are you guys utilizing that at all?
Not yet. We're using our EC3 calculator right now, as I've shared with you, but we're not using a rating system. But we'll use the EC3 calculator to basically prioritize, from a rating standpoint, where do we really want to pivot our design of our data centers to, and who are the right partners that we want to select that can help add the most value to reducing our carbon and helping us on our goals to being negative.
Okay. This morning there was a lot of talk about blockchain. How can it be used to track ESG and carbon footprint throughout the supply chain? And do you guys have any plans on leveraging that technology?
Sure. That's a great question. Yeah, so blockchain, we heard this morning, it's something that we're very interested in. We actually have several, what I'll call pilots underway right now to see how we utilize it in our data center. Right now, those pilots are kind of been investigated relative to how we contract. You heard the use of contracts this morning as one of the opportunities for blockchain. We're exploring that in pilot with OS2 team. We're excited about that. We'd like to step up with our GC partners and demonstrate, the feasibility of that, and then how we commercialize that across. We heard IPD. Blockchain and smart contracting is going to be the next level beyond IPD that really gets us to a point of one source of truth and utilizing blockchain as a way of driving competitive advantage and fairness across the supply chain, frankly speaking. So we're very excited about that. We haven't talked about it relative to other applications within the data center itself.
Okay. Do you believe that consumers and end users are willing to pay higher rates to support sustainability platforms?
Yeah. My personal belief on this is yes. If you're committed, are you willing to put some skin in the game? I think that's the response I would make. I mean, we as Microsoft, you heard me share, $1 billion already into our capital funds for the improvements that we're driving. The carbon fee that we're putting in is actually $15 per metric ton that goes in, gets paid by every single business, gets paid by every single function to continue to replenish that $1 billion to a point where it becomes a source of funding for us. And I don't have to go back to the CFO and really get justification for spending the money on something that's a core value for the company. I would believe that over time, our customers would be willing to be associated with a company like Microsoft that has these values. We talk a lot about it, we're acting about it, and we would become a preferred supplier of them of services. And they'd be willing to pay us for it.
Along those same lines, how can we hold companies accountable to both buy and build in locations that are following through on these sustainable challenges versus those that are not committed?
Yeah, so I would say I'm proud we have a committed set of global contractors that get it. They understand it. I know I've worked with many EPCs in my prior life. They get it as well. I think we need to help them, help us. And clearly they want to make a difference just like we do. They're in it. They're in it with us. And so I'm not seeing the supply chain being that negatively impacted because they're willing to step up. To what extent, yet to be determined, right? And more importantly, I'm looking for the partnership with them, because again, we don't have all the ideas. We want more ideas. And I think as we go across that supply chain and we truly get a partnership across the supply chain, magic happens. So to me, this is an opportunity for us to really take that to the next level. We got supportive ones already.
Yeah. For general contractors, and this will be the last question, for general contractors, are there any specific KPIs that they can focus on to start implementing these efforts and support their clients in achieving these goals?
Yeah. So great question. We don't call them KPIs in Microsoft, we call them OKRs, but the short answer is yes. Those are flanged together. So if we have separate set of metrics, right, and we're measuring something different, we're not going to get where we need to be. We need to align on what those critical KPIs are together, drive them together, everybody working together to advance them. And then if we run the models that we know that work in this industry in terms of shared gain and pain, we're all going to have the shared gain, in my opinion, on this one. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, they're doing it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody's attention and time. Thank you so much.